Hey, welcome to Genre Chat. I'm Caleb Walton, and today I am happy to welcome my friend Michelle Barfield to the show. Good morning, Michelle. How are you?
Good morning, Caleb. I'm fine, and thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I know I was excited to find another published author in my area. I don't usually find that. I live in a very, very small town in South Carolina, so you don't usually find people that close to you. It turns out we actually are from basically the same neighborhood almost. So,
I know, that's crazy. That is.
well, we
I
are
guess
going to talk about. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I guess we're both writing nerds, so
Yes.
it's okay.
Well, that's what the show is about, writing
Yeah.
nerds talking to each other. So,
I'm proud to be
uh,
one, so okay.
well, you just recently, within the past couple of years, published your debut novel. It's called The Well. Tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
that.
Well, I have to start by saying it was a God thing, and I don't
Hmm.
mean to sound, flippant about that, but it was definitely something that God put on my heart. I had no desire whatsoever to write a novel. I was comfortable with children's books, which I had published two before The Well. And I just thought that's what I would stick with. And God put this story on my heart, and I tried really hard to ignore it, but you know how that goes. You can't ignore God but so
Hmm.
long. And finally, I didn't even tell my husband. I just kept it to myself, thinking I'm not going to do this. I could, maybe I won't ever know how to finish it, or, I'll get stuck. I just was very intimidated. And so finally I shared it with my husband, and he said, "You have got to write this story down." And I said, "I don't even know where to start." He said, "Sit down in front of the computer and start typing." And that was probably the best advice that I got. I sat
Hmm.
down, and it just started to pour out like water. And I wrote it, the middle first, then the end, then the beginning, just kind of all over the place. You understand that, I'm
Yes,
sure.
absolutely. I'm an
And then it
ADHD
all,
writer, so I go all over the
yeah,
place. That's what you do.
yes. But then it just came together like a puzzle, just beautifully, like it was just all in place.
Hmm.
And it has just, from there, what's happened with it has just been mind blowing. But I'm just convinced that God's hand has been on it from the beginning. And, we'll see where it goes, but it's
And you
exciting.
actually had some exciting news recently about another project having to do with that book, right?
Yes, I have a producer who has committed the next year to The Well, and he is interested in doing a feature film. Of course, this would be independent film, as most Christian films are, independent, and we're supposed to get started first quarter of this year, so
That's
anytime.
awesome.
We
That's
have
so
written,
exciting.
yes, we have written the screenplay together, and he is in the process now of kind of revising, and it was a little long. And
Hmm.
I said, "You will have to cut anything that needs to be cut, because this is like choosing your favorite child of your children. I can't do it." I said, "You'll have to do it." So he is in the process now of, just shaving it back a little bit so it's not too long. So
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what was it like taking something that you've written, taking a book that you've written, and then translating that into a screenplay? Because I know you said you helped him write the screenplay. What was that like? What did you find that was kind of different transferring mediums like that?
well, with the book, you can write so much background. You can give so much of the backstory, and it's much more visual with a screenplay. So it was different, and I had a lot to learn. I'm sure I drove him crazy with questions, but he was very gracious to help me, and I kind of jumped in with both feet, and we'll see. We're going to submit it to the International Christian Film Festival that's coming up soon. I think the submission deadline is the end of this month. So,
No pressure.
I know. So anyway, we are excited about that.
And what's the genre for the book? What's the I know we had gone over it before. What was the labeled genre?
It's Christian fiction romance, sort of a lot, but it it has just, and I'm not saying this boastfully because I know where this story came from, but it just turned out beautifully, and I am amazed at the people who have reached out to me, written me, called me to tell me how they've been touched. Everybody has a rock bottom, and if you haven't been there, you will. Uh, and everybody's is different. But the book, there's something that happens in the book, and I don't want to give anything away, but I think it just causes everyone to think about maybe their rock bottom in their lives, or something that's happened, and whether it be a divorce, a death, whatever it is, I think people can really relate to the book.
Exactly, and that's what it's all about. Well, why did you choose to write in this particular genre? What inspired you about the story to write a romance and to include all those elements in it and to set it? Because I know it's set overseas. Is that right?
It's in Africa, yes. Which
Okay.
there again, when I say it's a God thing, I mean it. I have never been to Africa. What do I know about Africa? But God just laid it out there for me, and it's just amazing how the whole thing has worked.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like I didn't really choose this genre. It chose me. Does that make sense?
Exactly. Yes.
I was just given this story, and I just wrote what was on my heart. And I felt like every time I felt that I might be stuck, or I needed to figure out how to get this character from here to here, God just opened up and showed me the way. I would start the research, and there would be the answer. So
I heard someone describe it one time. I think it was Stephen James. It's not as much like building a house when you're building a story with like blueprints and everything. It's almost like you're uncovering a fossil, like a dinosaur fossil or something. You're just brushing everything aside until you discover what the story almost already is.
That is a great analogy. That is true.
Mm-hmm.
But and so many of the things that happen in the story are true to life things that they are dealing with in Africa even today. So it's very relevant. And for example, I'll give you an example. The country where the story is based is Burundi. It's a very, very poor country in Africa, one of the poorest. And they still have landmines in the ground from civil war in the past. Mm-hmm. And they don't have the financial resources to remove these landmines. So even today, children might be outside playing, step on a landmine. And it's so sad, but it happens even today. And so there's things in the story like that are true to life today in Africa.
Exactly. And that adds so much suspense to the story too, because you always have that kind of hanging over your head, not knowing really where it's safe to go in those types of countries.
Right.
So I'm sure that will help kind of propel the story in different scenes. What was it like transitioning? I mean, I know there's a big difference between writing adult fiction and children's books, which is what you were doing beforehand. I know you said you published several children's books. What did you find the major difference in how you went about writing it and just the genre in general that was when transitioning over like that?
Well, I taught school for 8 years, first and second grades, and I'm a mother. So I always feel like I had plenty of material for the children's books. So that's why I felt very comfortable there. I just felt like I know what children like. That was my favorite time of the day, reading to kids. So that was sort of easy for me. But like I said, I was very intimidated with transitioning over to the novel. I just did not feel comfortable. I didn't feel like I felt that I may spend all this time and put my heart into it and then not be able to finish. But I know I sound like I'm repeating the same thing again, but God just put it out there. Like I said, I probably myself would have never said, "Oh, I'm going to write a novel," but I had no choice. I had to just
really stepping out of your comfort zone, which is really good with writing. It actually, it helps you discover, flex your muscles and learn new things. So it's always good, I think, to kind of write in several different. Always try something new.
Even after I finished it, I didn't know what I had exactly. I sent it to my publishing company at the time. I have a new one now, so I sent it to my representative there, and I said, I really don't know what I have, but would you read this and just let me know? And I think I told you this yesterday. She is the kind of person who would, give you a real quick answer, one word, one sentence, two sentences max. Well, couple of days later, she sent me an email, and when I opened it, it was just a full page. And I thought, oh no, she is telling me you don't need to be writing novels. You know, this is terrible. But she just had connected with the story and the characters, and she started telling me her background and how these characters really related to her life. And the next day, she sent me a contract for the whale.
That's incredible. That's incredible for her to move that quickly, because most people have to submit to several different publishers and then get rejections and revise. And
yes, it was amazing. That's what I'm telling you. The whole thing has been unbelievable.
What are some things that you learned, especially this being your debut novel? I know you've written children's books and things like that before, but this being your debut fiction novel, what are some things that you learned through the process about the writing process and polishing it, taking from just the abstract idea to the finished product?
Well, I learned, I think, to write from your heart. Don't try to force it. Don't try to make it something. Don't try to send it in a certain direction. Just write from your heart. And I feel like one thing that I tried to tell myself was the characters, I wanted to feel like it would feel if I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, the way I would talk to my friend, So I tried to keep it very real. And, there's certain words that I just don't use in conversation much, like, for example, perhaps. I'm not going to sit down and have coffee and talk to a friend and say, perhaps, So I tried to use language that would be the way I would talk to my friends. And I think it gave a real warmth to the characters and really allowed people to connect. And I've had a lot of people say, even friends of mine, they've said, I think this character, you put some of me in there. They would think that I wrote that character based on them, which I thought was kind of really neat, because that tells me that they see themselves in the characters.
Exactly. Well, let's say that dialogue, one of the tricky things about dialogue is making it sound natural when you're reading it, because we interrupt ourselves and repeat the same thing 3 or 4 times in one sentence, and
Yes.
that would be really confusing reading it directly off a page. So that's it's a very difficult thing to do, making it read and it sound natural on the when you're reading it off the page in your mind.
And I'll tell you something funny about that is I am a person who, and maybe this is a Southern thing, when we speak more slowly, and I pause a lot in conversation. And I would put a comma everywhere I paused. And my editor said, you need to relax on the commas. And
I think that's my thing too, is I'm a little heavy-handed with the commas and the punctuation.
But I realized, I thought, well, you know what? It's where I would pause when I'm speaking, just like I did just then. And I would throw a comma in every time, and so I had to kind of go back and study up on the usage of commas.
Now, I know we touched on this a little bit, but did you sit down and do a formal outline at the beginning of the project, or did you just sort of write and just take notes as ideas came to you? And some people call that organic writing. It's just sort of letting the story unfold naturally. Did you know how it was going to end when you started it, or were you just sort of surprised by the ending?
I would say definitely organic. I started in the middle of the book, the dead center of the story. Wrote that first, which really was bizarre to me, because I was like, I don't even understand this really myself. I'm just writing this scene that I had imagined. And actually, it was kind of a tough scene to write. You know what I mean? It was emotional. And so I started there, and so it really didn't even make sense to me. I was like, what is this? Where do I go with this? And then I wrote the end, which was also odd, And so then I went back and wrote the beginning. And I think I told you it was like a puzzle. Literally, it was like a puzzle, but it came together like it was just meant to be. And it was beautiful. The story was.
How many rewrites do you think you did? I know writing is a process of going over it over and over and over and over again and changing things.
Yes, I did. I did rewrite a lot. And I think I will kind of get it out. Like, I have to just get it out and write it down. And then I can go back and just add the depth, add all the detail, and add just all the things that make it a good story. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So, yeah.
What are some things that helped you discover your characters and who they are? Because I know that's one of the things that you said that one of the main feedbacks you've got is how real the characters are. What are some things that you think help that along, getting to know the characters? Because if you're like me, I feel like I know some of my some of my characters almost as much as I know my friends that are real. You know, they
Yes.
feel real to you.
Don't you feel like, I feel like this, I'm going to run into them somewhere one day, like they're
Exactly.
out
Yes.
there, you know? I believe that well, let me tell you this. Several people who read it thought that I based the main character, Ava, on myself. Well,
Mhm.
I did not. That was certainly not my thought process. She's a doctor, she's a missionary in Africa. You know, I've never done any of those things, so that's not me. But she, you know, as the writer, of course, I put some of my personality in her. She's very stubborn, which I am too. And actually, that came in very handy with publishing books. You need to be a little stubborn, you know, not give up. But I put a little of myself in there. And as the writer, some people might read the book and never realize this. And maybe some of my family would know because, you know, of course, we're family. But there's a little bit of my mom, my dad, my husband, my son, my daughter, you know, little things that
Mhm.
are each one of them that maybe I am the only person who realizes that. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um, but I'll give you an example. My stepfather, he passed away, but he was just the most wonderful Christian, kind person. And he had this little saying he would always say about when, you know, how people will put on perfume or cologne and it's way too
Mhm.
heavy. And he would say, when that was the case, like in church, he would say, he'd lean over and say, perfume is not meant to be announced, but discovered. And
Oh, I
so,
like that. I
yes,
like
and so
that.
I
That's true for
used,
a lot of things.
yes, and so I used that, you know, so my family, when they read the book, they know that was from him. So I
Mhm.
put lots of little things in there that are just special to me. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So it just made them very real to me. So I guess it was easy to write them because they were so real to me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I know you said, you know, just the inspiration for writing a missionary in Africa, just sort of came through inspiration. What are some things that you did to help research that deeper and make it realistic? I mean, I know you said you've never been to Africa. I know you have done, you know, a lot of traveling, but did you speak to other missionaries or people like that to sort of get some context?
Well, I did. Our church sends our youth group to Haiti. They go to Haiti often. They have a relationship with a church there, and they go often and work with the people in Haiti. And so I was able to talk to a lot of people who had been there. And we also have a couple in our church that I'm friends with, and they spent a lot of time in China. And they just would share with me, you know, details about their experience. And I was just kind of able to pull from those things. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
That's good. That's good. What are some different things that setting added to the story? And being in Africa, I know you mentioned about the landmines being in Africa. The I know everything's different. The climate, the culture, everything like that. Did that have an impact on the story?
Oh, yes. And you know, the well, the
Mhm.
whole the whole thing behind that is that the Ava, the doctor from the United States who goes over as she goes over as a doctor, but then she realizes that one of the main causes of this illness there and death is waterborne illness from drinking unclean water. So she reaches out to her contacts in the United States to help her put a well in that would help this poor rural area. And, you know, that's very realistic to what's going on in Africa right now. So, you know, just keeping it as true to life as possible. And I can't
Mhm.
remember the second part of the question. Caleb?
I think no,
Sorry,
you answered it
I talked too
perfectly.
long.
You answered it perfectly.
Oh, that's funny.
I'm always dangerous when I run into another person that likes to talk as much as I do.
No, oh, I know what else I was going to say is, you know, she her Christian beliefs, and to see that some of the beliefs there were very different from hers, things that she couldn't understand, made her, would really touch her heart, because she felt that she really wanted these people to understand Jesus and the free gift that he's offering. And she was pained by some of the things, that rituals and things that she saw there, that she knew were just, they were lost. So, yeah.
And I meant to ask you what inspired some of the spiritual elements in the story, because it really is, it's a love story with two different angles, a love story between the characters, the two main characters, and also their relationship with God. What are some things that sort of inspired their spiritual struggles throughout the book?
Well, of course, my spiritual walk, I wanted to write something that would bring honor and glory to God. And, I would love for something that I wrote to be able to plant a seed, in someone's life. When I would go see movies like War Room, the way that it made me feel, I just wanted to write something that would touch people the way that those movies touched me. You know what I mean? Just, I don't know, just the idea of leaving that legacy behind, that book will be here, I hope, and now the movie, hopefully, for a long, long time. And you don't know how many people might be touched or a seed planted, over time, just to know that that's possible.
Exactly.
Just amazing to me. So.
Exactly. Well, what advice would you give to somebody who is trying to write a novel in this same genre, and also someone who's just working on their first novel? I mean, I know your debut novel obviously is very successful, and that's something that a lot of people don't get, is the first thing they actually try to do, being published and being very successful. What's some advice you would give to someone who's in that writing process?
Well, I would just say, if I can do it, anybody can do it. Again, write from the heart, write what you love, write what makes you feel that you're doing something positive. I just I love writing. I didn't like writing. I didn't start writing until I was 40 years old. So
really? What made you start writing? I mean, I know, how long have you been, I know you said you did some children's books before this. How long have you been writing in general?
Well, I'll tell you this story, and I'll try not to cry. I'll pretend like you're not Oprah. So anyway, my husband and I had our first child in 2002. We had our son Riley, who is 16 now and driving, which I can't even believe that. But we decided we wanted to have a second child, and we went through a terrible time trying to have a second child, and we lost 2 babies. And that was my rock bottom. That was just unimaginable, emotionally painful to me, And I was getting close to 40, and I was thinking, I have this beautiful boy, and I wanted a little girl so badly. And finally, I had to just surrender that and say, some people don't have a child. I have this precious boy, and if that is what God intended for me, then I'm going to be happy, But in my heart, I really did want that little girl. I wanted a girl and a boy, And so I really had almost given up. And finally, I just gave it to God and said, it's in your hands. I can't do anything, And so then when we finally had our second child, Sully, and I had 2 beautiful, healthy children, I tell people I wrote the Sully bug it was my therapy and my thank you note to God for 2 beautiful, healthy children. And people think—
I see the cover of it right behind you too.
Yes, this is it. But people think that it's all about Sully, but actually Riley is the main character. He's the main character in the story, and she's kind of the little surprise at the end. So it's really about both of them. It's just when one of my friends first saw her after she was born, she picked her up and said, "Oh, what a cute little Sully bug," and the nickname stuck. She's still to this day called Sully Bug by a lot of her friends and our family. So it really is about both of them. But that was my first book after going through that experience. And really, that was my therapy and my thank you note to God. And then from that came the second children's book. This is Weezy's Wedding, and that was based on a real life experience when I was a little girl, going to my aunt's wedding. And I thought that was the most, she had a big, huge, church wedding with all the bells and whistles. And I was probably 6. And I just thought that was the most amazing thing I had ever seen in my life. And so I went home, and my little cousin, who was 2 years younger than me, a little boy, came over, and I told him we were going to play wedding. And he did not want to participate at all, but being the bossy little girl that I was, I made him play. So this was the story of that childhood experience. So it's really sweet. I've even had people buy this book to give to brides who were getting married. So adult women who, yeah. So, and then from that, then came the well. So,
and writing from grief and gratitude and life experience is what makes it so real and so relatable.
Yes, that is true. That is true.
Well, I have enjoyed talking to you so much, and I cannot wait to read. I know I've got a copy on the way. I can't wait to read it. Where's somewhere that somebody can go? Like I know you mentioned they had a website for the movie, the upcoming movie, and I know it's also going to be on like Amazon, places like that.
Yes, the movie page is The Well, the Movie, and that's on Facebook. You can go on there and get out, and we're going to show the entire process. We just really launched the page because we are just now finalizing the script, so we're going to just show the whole process through the making of the movie. As far as the book, they can go to my new publisher, which is Yorkshire Publishing, and they have a bookstore on their website. You can buy the book there, and then you can buy it on Amazon also.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I've enjoyed
Thank
talking to you.
Caleb.
Good luck with all the stuff coming up. That's so exciting. I can't wait to see where it all goes.
Well, we'll stay in touch. So yes. I want you to call me after you read the book so we can talk.
Oh, absolutely. We're going to nerd out over that.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show, and we will see you guys next time.
Sounds good. Thank you.